after the episode of English literature. Now our episode for today is about the greatest poet writer, Shakespeare. He was born and raised in Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire. At the age of 18, he married Anne Hathaway, with whom he had 3 children, Susanna and twins Hamnet and Judith. Sometime between 1585 and 1592, he began a successful career in London as an actor, writer, and part owner of a playing company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men, later known as the King's Men. At age 49, around 1613, he appears to have retired to Stratford, where he died 3 years later. Few records of Shakespeare's private life survive. This has stimulated considerable speculation about such matters as his physical appearance, his sexuality, his religious beliefs, and whether the works attributed to him were written by others. Shakespeare, born on the 26th of April 1564, he was an English playwright, poet, and actor, widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. He is often called England's national poet and the Bard of Avon, or simply the Bard. His extant works, including collaborations, consist of some 39 plays, c. 154 sonnets, 3 long narrative poems, and a few other verses, some of uncertain authorship. His plays have been translated into every major living language and are performed more often than those of any other playwright. They also continue to be studied and reinterpreted. Many of Shakespeare's plays were published in editions of varying quality and accuracy in his lifetime. However, in 1623, 2 fellow actors and friends of Shakespeare's, John Heminges and Henry Kendall, published a more definitive text known as the First Folio, a posthumous collected edition of Shakespeare's dramatic works that included all but 2 of his plays. Its preface was a prescient poem by Ben Jonson that hailed Shakespeare with the now famous epithet, "not of an age, but for all time." Shakespeare was not revered in his lifetime, but he received a large amount of praise. In 1598, the cleric and author Francis Mears singled him out from a group of English playwrights as the most excellent in both comedy and tragedy. The authors of the Parnassus plays at St. John's College, Cambridge, numbered him with Chaucer, Gower, and Spenser. 231. In the First Folio, Ben Jonson called Shakespeare the soul of the age, the applause, delight, the wonder of our stage, although he had remarked elsewhere that Shakespeare wanted art, lacked skill between the restoration of the monarchy in 1660 and the end of the 17th century. Classical ideas were in vogue. As a result, critics of the time mostly rated Shakespeare below John Fletcher and Ben Jonson. Thomas Rymer, for example, condemned Shakespeare for mixing the comic with their tragic. Nevertheless, poet and critic John Dryden rated Shakespeare highly, saying of Jonson, "I admire him, but I love Shakespeare." For several decades, Rymer's view held sway, but during the 18th century, critics began to respond to Shakespeare on his own terms and acclaim what they termed his natural genius. A series of scholarly editions of his work, notably those of Samuel Johnson in 1765 and Edmund Malone in 1790, added to his growing reputation. By 1800, he was firmly enshrined as the national poet in the 18th and 19th centuries. His reputation also spread abroad. Among those who championed him were the writers Voltaire, Goethe, Stendhal, and Victor Hugo. The Shakespeare authorship question is the argument that someone other than William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon wrote their works attributed to him. Anti-Stratfordians, a collective term for adherents of the various alternative authorship theories, believe that Shakespeare of Stratford was a front to shield the identity of the real author or authors, who for some reason, usually social rank, state security, or gender, did not want or could not accept public credit. Although the idea has attracted much public interest, all but a few Shakespeare scholars and literary historians consider it a fringe theory, and for the most part acknowledge it only to rebut or disparage the claims. Shakespeare's authorship was first questioned in the middle of the 19th century, when adulation of Shakespeare as the greatest writer of all time had become widespread. 5. Shakespeare's biography, particularly his humble origins and obscure life, seemed incompatible with his poetic eminence and his reputation for genius. 6-7, arousing suspicion that Shakespeare might not have written the works attributed to him. 8. The controversy has since spawned a vast body of literature. 9. And more than 80 authorship candidates have been proposed. 10. The most popular being Sir Francis Bacon, Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, Christopher Marlowe, and William Stanley, 6th Earl of Derby. 11. Supporters of alternative candidates argue that theirs is the more plausible author, and that William Shakespeare lacked the education, aristocratic sensibility, or familiarity with the royal court that they say is apparent in the works. 12. Those Shakespeare scholars who have responded to such claims hold that biographical interpretations of literature are unreliable in attributing authorship. 13. And that the convergence of documentary evidence used to support Shakespeare's authorship, title pages, testimony by other contemporary poets and historians, and official records, is the same used for all other authorial attributions of his era. 14. No such direct evidence exists for any other candidate. 15. And Shakespeare's authorship was not questioned during his lifetime or for centuries after his death despite the scholarly consensus. A relatively small 18, but highly visible and diverse assortment of supporters, including prominent public figures, 19, have questioned the conventional attribution. 20. They work for acknowledgement of the authorship question as a legitimate field of scholarly inquiry, and for acceptance of one or another of the various authorship candidates.